Hello everybody. In this short presentation we're going to cover some basic issues of demand and supply, two very important concepts in economics, as you can imagine. So we'll take a quick look at demand, we'll take a quick look at supply, and we'll look at an understanding, we'll try to get an understanding of what is meant by equilibrium in a marketplace. Some of you have probably noticed that locally grown goods are probably more expensive than when you go into your grocery store and buy something that may even be from very far away. And some of you may wonder, well, why is this the case? It's due to a lot of things. It could be that, well, there's not a lot of supply of local goods, that they're very rare, and because they're rare, the producers maybe are asking for a higher price. You may also see that sometimes people want to pay more for local goods and services. The local goods and services could have, for example, a better perception of quality. People may believe they're higher quality. So usually the price is determined by an interaction of supply and demand. On one side, producers want a certain price for the goods and services. On the other side, consumers are willing to pay or ready to pay a certain price for these goods and services. And it's the same for locally grown produce. So some important definitions to keep in mind as we study demand, for example. So demand is the amount of some good or service you're willing to purchase, you're able to purchase at each price. And this is an important fact right here when we talk about each price. And you'll see what that means in a few minutes. The price obviously is what the buyer pays for 1 unit of a specific good or service. The quantity demanded is the total number of units of a good or service that you pay at a given price. So if the price is 10, how much will you buy? That's the quantity that you demand. And the law of demand clearly states that keeping all other variables that affect demand constant, meaning this is ceteris paribus, if the price goes up, then usually we want to buy less of it. And if the price goes down, usually we want to buy more of it. So let's take a look at these principles in action. To see this, we'll create what's called a demand schedule. A demand schedule is basically a table showing the prices and quantities demanded, for example, for a good or service. And the demand curve is the representation of this schedule on a graph. So let's take, for example, the demand for gasoline. Here we have the demand for gasoline. We can see that for each of the prices, we have a various number of prices here. There's a quantity demanded. Again, this is the quantity demanded at each price. So at price of 1, we want 800. At price of 2, at 120, we want 700. At price of 2, we want 460, etc. And we can see that the quantity demanded will increase. We see it going up from 420 to 800 as the price goes down. We can see the price going from 220 to 100, and we can see the quantity demanded going from 420 to 800. There's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Now, if we take these different prices, price here, let's say we have 1, and we want to buy 800 units. So we put a point right here, for example. We're going to stick a dot right here at this point, and that's going to tell us the quantity we want to buy. And we do that for every other product. What do we get? And every other price, what do we get? We're going to get a representation of the demand curve for each price. We see the corresponding quantity demanded of gasoline, the millions of gallons of gasoline. So at the price of 140, the consumers are ready to buy 600 million gallons. At a price of 180, 500 million gallons. At a price of 220, 420 million gallons. And we see this inverse relationship, and it's represented by a negative slope of the demand curve. So we see the law of demand in action. As prices go down, the quantity demanded goes up, ceteris paribus, all other things remaining constant. And it's quite simple, and we see this in daily life. Now let's Take a look at supply. Now, supply is basically the same thing. We know that the amount that we want to supply of a good or service usually will increase as the price goes up. A good example would be, imagine that you mow grass for your neighbors. You take care of your neighbor's yard. And to do this, you rent a small hand mower and pay for the gas to power the mower. Normally, you're mowing 3 yards, for example, and you charge about 20 euros for each yard you mow. And you do this because you like to have some free time. You don't use all of your time in the weekend. You use some of it, and you mow some grass, and you make, well, 3 times 20, you make 60 euros mowing grass. Now, some people want you to mow their grass. You currently are saying, well, no, I want to spend some free time by myself on the weekend. I don't want any more. I do not want to mow any more yards. Well, what's going to happen is that people will slowly say, well, we'll pay you more money. We'll pay you more to mow our lawn. And at some point, probably you'll say, yeah, okay, great, I'll mow grass. And so overall, you'll say, okay, at 30 euros per yard, maybe I'm willing to mow 5 yards. And so the number of yard mowings, or the number of yards you mow, increases. Here we see the quantity supplied increases as the price of the good or service goes up. So if you have a higher price, you're willing to supply a higher amount. So again, like demand, supply is the amount of some good or service a producer is willing to supply at each price. We have a supply schedule. The quantity supplied is the total number of units of a good or service producers are willing to sell at a given price. So we take a price and we look and see, well, what is the quantity that they want to supply? And the law of supply is the exact opposite of the law of demand, keeping all other variables that affect supply constant. If the price goes up, then the quantity supplied goes up. If the price goes down, then the quantity supplied will go down. And we can see that there's a supply schedule and a supply curve, just like we saw for demand. So here is our demand that we had before. This is the demand for gasoline. Now we're going to map out the supply of gasoline. And we see that at each price we have a certain amount that producers of gasoline are ready to supply. And we can find these points on this diagram. We see that at a price of 1, they'll supply 500. So if the price is 1, we would have, let's say, right here we have 500. If the price is 120, 550. So a little bit more. If the price is 140, 600. Up, and we're exactly where the demand is. If the price is 160, they're ready to supply 640 units. So something around here, for example, etc. We plot out these points, and we will see the supply curve emerge. There it is, mapping each one of the price values to the quantity supplied. And obviously, you can imagine that a very important point is going to occur where these two diagrams and where these two curves intersect, right here, because at this price, the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are the same. And that's the all-important equilibrium in the market. Now, what happens if we're not in equilibrium in the marketplace and price is higher than 140? Well, again, let's get back and let's try this. Well, at 140, what do we have? We have, if price is 140, so here we're at 140, the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are both 600. So again, this is demand here, and this is supply. Now, what happens if price is 180? If price is 180, we're up here, and we see that the quantity supplied, so this is the quantity supplied, quantity demanded. This is the quantity demanded here, and the quantity supplied, there's a gap. There's a difference here. If price is 180, the quantity demanded is here. The quantity the people want to sell is over here, and we have a gap. And this gap is called, well, we have a surplus. We have too much supply. We have supply again here, demand here. If price is 180, the quantity supplied is here. The quantity demanded is here. And we have a surplus of gasoline in this case. So we have excess supply. Now, what happens if price is 120? When price is 120, the quantity supplied is here, the quantity demanded is higher, and here we have excess demand. The quantity demanded is 700, the quantity supplied is around 540, so we have excess demand, or we have what's called a shortage. So when price is not at its equilibrium value, we either have surpluses or we have shortages. Now, because these surpluses and shortages exist, imagine you're at a price of 180, right? And we have the suppliers, they want to sell a lot, but demanders don't want to buy what they've been producing. So you have all of these suppliers manufacturing a whole bunch of goods and services that are not being bought. These units here are not being bought. Well, the best way for somebody to get people to buy their product is to decrease their price. And so we will see pressure on price to move downward towards this equilibrium value. And the same is true if price is 120. If price is 120 down here, a whole bunch of people want to buy the good. Suppliers are making a little bit. Well, what's going to happen? Because all these people want to buy and there's a smaller amount being supplied, some of the people over here are going to say, well, I'll pay you more for that good. I'll give you a little bit more. I really want it. It's in short supply. I'll pay you more. And there's pressure for price to increase. And so the existence of these shortages and surpluses create pressure on price to move towards the equilibrium value. And that's how we move towards equilibrium in a marketplace. So equilibrium, again, is the combination of price and quantity, whereas there is no pressure from surpluses or shortage that would cause price or quantity to change. We arrive at this point where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. There's no surpluses and there's no shortages. And at equilibrium, we arrive at the equilibrium price, where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. And we have the equilibrium quantity, where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal at a given price. So in this short video, we've covered the law of demand. We've explained the difference between the demand schedule and demand curve and the quantity demanded at each point on that demand curve. We've looked at the law of supply. We've covered the difference between the supply curve, supply schedule, and the quantity supplied at each price, so the different points on that curve. We've looked quickly at what is a surplus and a shortage, and we've understood the concept of equilibrium. Let's move on to our next video.